With the Rockets' recent struggles, and especially throughout the season, there have been many things to blame as they've been literally the worst team in the NBA. Offensively and defensively, they've been pretty horrible. Some people may blame the coaching staff, others may blame the players. In my personal opinion, I think it's a mixture of both, and today we're going to be breaking down these problems and talking about why the Rockets have been struggling as hard as they've been. Before we get into the video, I'd appreciate if you guys drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I'd appreciate it, and let's get into the video. So the Houston Rockets, they have a very young team, as most of their team is under 30, except for Eric Gordon, who's around 33 years old. And they do have other vets, Dennis Schroeder, Garrison Matthews, David Nwaba. They have all these other vets, but this might seem like a problem, but it's really a great thing to have veterans on a young team that can help the young players grow and develop and learn from their past experiences, like in the playoffs. Now, this doesn't mean that everything is great, as they have the worst record in the West, standing at 15th in the conference and with a record of 17-54. There have been a lot of things that have contributed to the Rockets' downslide, and most of these problems can be fixed. It's only a matter of using the time and the great offseason to really just address these problems. So one problem that has very drastically affected the Rockets is their change of head coach. So previously in the 2019-2020 season, it was Mike D'Antoni who coached this team. It was, the James Harden and Russell Westbrook era, alongside, PJ Tucker, Robert Covington, Capella, all those guys. And he did a solid job. Offensively, he was one of the best, but defensively, he was pretty bad. But after that season, he left, and a ton of names were in consideration for the head coaching position. I remember Tyronn Lue was in the mix. There's a lot of guys. I think Chauncey Billups was in there. I'm not too sure. There were a lot of guys, and the Houston Rockets chose Stephen Silas. So he still holds the head coaching position, and to be quite frank, he's been pretty horrible with how he's directed this young Rockets team. He's shown flashes of being a decent coach. He has a lot of good plays. His playbook is pretty interesting. He'll have the occasional great play, good inbounds play, good play, maybe like a 5-out, but most of the time it's probably just a dead possessions. So he's been showing flashes of being a decent coach, but on a rebuilding team, with young players, there isn't really a reason we should keep him. He's a coach that's going to be thriving on a contender, and it makes sense because I think he's better suited on a contender, and his skills as a head coach can be very much used on a contender like the Lakers. Not saying that they're going to fire Frank Vogel, but if they do decide to, then Stephen Silas would be a pretty good name in consideration for that job. With the Rockets, Silas has a record of 34 wins and 109 losses. I think with the Rockets too, we won around 17 games, which is pretty horrible. It's a horrible ratio overall. So as a Rockets fan, I'm hoping Stephen Silas can turn things around, but at this point in time in the season, we do versus the Wizards tonight, so hopefully we do see some improvements, but there's just way too much he needs to fix as a head coach. Rotations have been a huge thing. Touches for players like Jalen Green, KPJ, Garrison Matthews, Dennis Schroeder, Jae'Sean, and overall just defense. Defense is the biggest thing that Stephen Silas has to address. It's been a huge issue this whole season, and he hasn't been able to address it at all. So I'm hoping that maybe even next season, if we do decide to keep him, defense is going to be a priority for this team. So although the head coach can be the main source of the problems, the players can also be blamed for the recent struggles. Two players in particular have been greatly contributed in the Rockets' recent struggles. Not saying that these two players are the main source of the problem, especially recently. So first, we got Christian Wood. Wood has been nothing short of amazing, especially last year with the Rockets. He was basically an undrafted prospect in around, was it 2015, I think? Yeah, 2015. He's been amazing, in the last few seasons. And he was a top candidate for the Most Improved Award last season. Comparing it to this season, he's looked to have regressed and is playing a lot worse than he usually does. Most of his struggles are defensively, which is something he struggles with a lot. Consistency to play at a high level isn't all there either. He has been pretty on and off this season. He's able to grab a double-double overall, but his consistency is pretty much shot through the roof. Scoring the ball when he needs to is another huge issue for Christian Wood. With Christian Wood demanding the ball a lot, he's going to be playing a lot of hero ball when we don't really need him to. Go to Jalen Green, go to KPJ, who we will talk about later. I don't know, Wood has just a big ego, and he believes he's a max contract player, but looking at his season overall and his season performance, he definitely isn't worth a max contract. And over the season, he's averaging around 18 points per game, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, and he's averaging a double-double, but the Rockets are still losing, so his stats are pretty much empty at this point. We do have around 11 games left, so hopefully we can see something at least from Christian Wood. But, although Wood isn't the only player to negatively affect the Rockets, it's also KPJ as of late. KPJ, he had a lot of hype coming to Houston last season, trading a second-round pick for KPJ to the Cavs. Don't get me wrong, KPJ has been very great for the Houston Rockets last season, showing out his potential to be a playmaker. And, with him trying to adapt to a new position, the primary point guard, comparing it to the Cavs where he was playing the small forward position, he's been super subpar with his new role, As the primary point guard, he's actually averaging around 14 points per game, averaging around 4 rebounds and 6 assists, which isn't all that great. I think most of us thought that KPJ would be averaging around like 14 and 8 or 15 and 9 or something around there. And he hasn't really shown too much. Coming into the season, I thought he was going to be a top MIP candidate, and he hasn't shown anything at all. Especially last game where he technically gave up on a play mid-game. It isn't something you want to see from your starting caliber point guard, but we do got to take in that he is only 21 years old and has a lot of time to grow, but his attitude is absolutely unacceptable, and he needs to learn that body language and effort go a long way, especially when you are losing by a wide margin and when you are playing a game. So I also still believe in KPJ, like I said with Christian Wood, but he needs to work on a ton. His attitude is pretty much horrible on the court especially, and his mental capability to stay locked in the game isn't all that great too. So both KPJ and Wood have their fair share of negatives, but these two players should be viewed as some pretty important pieces for this organization moving forward. Either trading them, keeping them, using them to build around a championship contending team, or overall using them as role players. So overall, the Rockets can fix these problems, as they are something that can be fixed in the offseason with a lot of changes, with a lot of working out, and overall just building that chemistry. The only real thing that'll test the Rockets is if they can have that mentality to win and just keep locked in. The only thing that'll test the Rockets is if they can have that mentality to win next season and just stay locked in. So that's in the video. I'm JDC. Peace.